Patriotism means many things to many people, but in my eyes, the definition of patriotism is being proud of your country, loving your country, but not being afraid to critique your country, especially when it is doing heinous acts or, unfortunately, very, very, very stupid ones. And as you can imagine, my home country, America, is at the center point of that. That being said, that does not stop us from still giving input for July 4th. So that got me thinking, what could be something that would resonate well? Especially since we're kind of burning through specific movies tied to July 4th. But then I got to thinking, back to my childhood, a series that I used to watch on PBS Kids a lot, known as Liberty's Kids. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, a kids' show for education of the Revolutionary War. Surely they'll have to dumb things down. That's the thing. No, this doesn't. Ladies and gentlemen, from the depths of my childhood, in 2002, there was a show hosted by PBS Kids called Liberty's Kids, stylized on the screen as Liberty's Kids, estimated was 1776.
At the
But
very least, they not put the Z at the end of kids.
yeah, the 90s weren't entirely dead yet. Now again, it may seem like your everyday kid show, but no, it was more than just that. Despite being a dick cartoon, this one managed to get some actors who you may recognize. Oh, just Sylvester Stallone as Paul Revere, Ben Stiller as Thomas Jefferson, Annette Bening as Abigail Williams, Dustin Hoffman as Benedict Arnold, Michael Douglas as Patrick Henry, Arnold Schwarzenegger, yes, that Arnold Schwarzenegger as Baron von Steuben, Liam Neeson as John Paul Jones, Whoopi Goldberg as Deborah Sampson, Michael York as Admiral Lord Richard Lau, and so much, much, much more. In fact, one of the recurring actors is CBS News anchorman Walter Cronkite as Benjamin Franklin. Yeah, we'll be seeing him again here.
How specific.
So, we're going to do something a little different today. We're not doing a movie commentary, but we're not doing an entire series run for the time being. Instead, I'm going to give my co-commentators Tio and Dwibs a taste of this series, starting with the first 3 episodes, essentially. And, to much of our watching luck and convenience, this is a show so old that it is now officially on YouTube, ready for just about anyone to watch, essentially.
And by that, I think it's in official capacity from whoever owns it now. They kind of did the same thing that some anime companies are doing with some old properties. Instead of being, someone who just decided to pirate the entire series and just, illegally upload for the sake of preservation. It seems to be official at the very least.
Companies are finally starting to realize, oh wait, maybe we should actually try to profit off of this old stuff by making it easy to view instead of just leaving it to some YouTuber.
Not sure why the episodes are labeled with the 100 label, 100, 100, 2, and so on.
It's how some series are coded, like 1XO1, 2XO5, and so on.
All right, then.
Basically, the idea would be this would be the first season, and, anything from a second season would start with 201 and all that. So, basically, just located on YouTube under Liberty's Kids, the Wild Brain channel.
Well, links in the descriptions as usual, so...
Simple as that. And, yeah, basically start play the same time we do. On the first episode, The Boston Tea Party, Pilot Part 1, in 3, 2, 1, click.
I guess PBS is... I've looked into, PBS is kind of like the BBC, except unlike the BBC, you don't have to pay PBS a license fee to watch TV at all.
Pretty much.
What was the animation? Okay, yeah, I answered my own question. The animation studio is Dick Entertainment, but I've seen this particular art style somewhere else for a cartoon that was not Dick.
In terms of shows that originally came from PBS, the one I remember most is the 2000 version of Clifford the Big Red Dog. And even then, that had a British dub.
As a kid, there were a couple of shows based on some specific books or comics like Barbe Rouge or The Black Corsair that had a similar art style as this, but I don't think they were actually done by Dick. I think some of them might have been done by Studio Sec, but I'm not entirely sure.
I know Dick were like the main housing company, but I do wonder if it was a different animation company that worked on this.
Possible. Although, again, just to clarify, unlike the Sonic cartoons, this was not sponsored by Italian Mafia. In fact, I don't even think my country got this.
Wait, you're showing us a few scenes before the episode starts?
I guess it's a case of, in this episode, you will witness this.
Yeah, quite a few shows
remember
worked
it was
like this in the
yeah.
2000s.
Oh, goody, we start with this.
You know, honestly, this show encapsulates a strategy that I think more companies should realize the importance of. Educating kids through entertainment and media, essentially.
I do wonder, considering it's still a cast, I guess it's a case of, insert child characters in what is to be the conflict. Yes, you told me that, they don't really sugarcoat the more dire aspects of the Revolutionary War. I can't believe that, but it's more of a case of, like, how can you justify their presence? It's like when you have someone like, I think we're getting the name, the guy that tired himself out in order to warn everyone the British were coming.
Speaking of British, this accent needs a bit of work.
Yes, this is Sarah Phillips, played by Rio Jones, who does not have a Wikipedia page, so I can't tell you her nationality.
Maybe IMDb tells something.
Well, considering this show was made in the US on a PBS budget, I don't think they cast anyone outside who was living in the mainland at the time.
This is apparently her only acting role credit on IMDb.
Oh.
Okay, apparently she's American-British.
I also say I get about the storm, but it's not a good sign when the show starts about like causing a seizure.
Oh, yeah, now I remember. One thing they did was they would sort of hint to you certain scenes by having them go in and out of the sepia tone like that.
Like, is it the framing device a recollection of events from her diary?
Not entirely, but that is one of them. Anyway, as for how they justify kids being around, well, one of the things they do is that two of the main cast are actually teenagers. Needless to say, back in the old days, it was a lot easier for teenagers to get mixed up in some of the more deadly goings-on, including having a job.
Also, I see the YouTube copy as the deal of making subtitles position themselves on the side of the screen to understand which character is talking. I personally don't have a problem. I know that Shiro finds this a bit distracting, so I know that there's an audience for this, but it's not super helpful.
This is another one of our main characters, James Hiller, who works for Benjamin Franklin at the printing press. And yes, here is Henry Richard Maurice Dutta Lafrebe, voiced by Kathleen Barr, the only one of the main three characters who has an actor with a Wikipedia page.
Huh. Is that going to take a while?
Yeah.
Ben, what are you wearing? It's a raccoon skin cap. I know what it is, but
So is this the guy voiced by that CBS newsreader?
Benjamin Franklin, yes.
Also, I love it. The moment we're introduced to Ben, he's literally flirting with someone. My God.
Yeah, again, kudos to the show. It does its research and it's not afraid to show some of the more questionable things, which, you know what? Look, any show that knows that kids don't always need to be babied, I'd appreciate. Now, obviously, they don't go with, like, blood and gore with some of the war scenes.
What was that transition?
And we got a beer. I'm sorry, this is a kids' educational show. Frothy milk.
Root beer.
Come on, we all know that. And yes,
Well,
that is
speaking of
Samuel
beer,
Adams.
here's Sam Adams. Always the best choice.
Well, don't you know, people always make the best decisions after a drink.
I don't think I actually have drunk Sam Adams beer, but I cannot, every time it's nominated, I cannot stop thinking about the Family Guy's kid.
Yeah, okay. Britain didn't treat the US very well at this time. I wonder how it treated Canada.
I forget if this show also goes into that, but oh yeah, the Boston Massacre. Yes.
Yeah. Overtaxation, which led to discontent, which led to suppression by military force. Classic.
And the Boston Massacre, for a lot, was the last straw.
Wonder how many people say that about Boston in modern day.
It's ironic.
Well, the only major thing I know about Boston, aside from having a prominent Italian, immigrant community, is that according to the original Parent Trap movie, it's not an interesting place to be in.
I'll say that there's a good deal of stuff to do in Boston. I'm not sure I'd say it's my number one place.
No, don't be the Sons of Liberty. That's a bad idea.
Whoa!
This is where they got the name from.
Yeah, pretty much. The whole thing about the Patriots and seeing, this, because, he was also mentioning the book studies and everything. If you've seen also Oversimplified's video about the Russian War, you know about it. So the best course of action to cause the Boston Tea Party was for people to do red face.
Yep.
Of course. I get maybe the idea they wanted to use that as an escamotage because let's not kid ourselves. At the time there was pretty much all the racism against natives.
Assuming since Jovah says that the team did their research on this, I get you want your freedom from British colonialism. But I don't think cultural appropriation is going to help your case very much.
I think the mentality at that point was that in the eventuality of being caught, they could blame the natives for that, which is still a dick move to do.
Yes.
No pun intended.
Yes, that's a good aspect of the show. It does not whitewash the actions of either side. It shows some of the heinous stuff, especially the brutal stuff the British did, like burning down several villages, but also does go to point out how the American side weren't exactly angels themselves.
Guys, there's 3 civilians down on the water. What do we do?
Who cares? Just dump more of the magic leaves.
Yeah,
So,
don't dump anything else. But, sir, they're all in chests and we're not looking as we throw them away. What if we dump something else by mistake?
We've clearly come too far to back out.
I also get that, the gesture is overly symbolic because,
there's one guy checking at least.
Because logically, the best course of action would have been to, steal the tea because it's a resource that could be sold. But I get the idea the colonies with this, they were basically saying, this shit ain't good enough for us.
Pretty much.
That gag just then, where he's like, isn't it what he's saying? You just heard him say it.
Okay.
It's like that SpongeBob. It's like that SpongeBob gag where he was like, I don't know, Squidward told me to yell at people.
I'm sorry. What are these transitions?
It's like he broke the scene.
You know what that reminds me? I don't know if you've ever seen that, Weaves, but the Container Fox Kids program occasionally had some publicity banners in between, commercial and stuff that were simulating a first-person dungeon crawler video game. It kind of reminds me of that, those kind of transitions.
She sounds like a weird mixture of somewhat British, but also a bit Canadian.
So uncivilized.
Well, given that Kathleen Barr is Canadian, maybe that's the idea, but yeah. Basically, Sarah is used to kind of show a bit more so the British perspective from the war, essentially, whereas James over here is meant to show more so the American side of it. Yeah.
Just tell me your fucking name.
That was a point of contention back then, I guess, how the Americans were kind of changing up their dialect compared to ye old English.
Well, it did not help that much like with Australia. The colonies were just an excuse for the UK, well, the British Empire to send away the undesired, aka Scottish, Irish, and Welsh people.
Mm-hmm.
People are yelling and throwing stuff overboard. Of course, I'm going to raise my voice a little bit.
Well, guess the tea party's over.
Bummer.
Oh, I was enjoying that party.
There's always that one guy that calls the cops a piece of shit.
Well, in this case, the British Army.
Yeah, that's the thing. From her perspective, they're traitors to the crown, which, as you can imagine, will complicate things a bit.
Yep, the British Army, everybody, being defeated by how old is he?
15, I believe.
15-year-old.
He lives.
Again, that's basically what happens during these kids shows. So I understand that. I'm more wondering about something else, but that's something that I guess the next episodes will do. Otherwise, I'll ask at the end of episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you sure sound like it.
Okay, all joking on that end aside, I do like how, this show avoids that trapping that a lot of media around the Revolutionary War tends to forget that, yeah, we couldn't just say stuff like the British are coming because technically, yeah, everyone was British. Well, both sides were British at the time.
It's also one of the more discussed part about the whole event, the idea that the revolution and everything was just a fanciful term for people to just change the color of a flag, but otherwise they had remained the same.
Mm-hmm.
Which, honestly, considering what happened immediately after with Manifested Destiny and then the Civil War, yeah, there's a lot.
Yes.
Yes.
May I see them? No.
You know what? For any aspiring person who wants to make a Dark Souls clone, I want one set during these times. That would be interesting.
Yeah, that could actually be pretty cool. Dick cartoon or not, this definitely feels like one of their best budgeted ones between the many guest actors that show up for the show and the music sounding
That's
definitely better quality than I remember most Dick cartoons.
that's probably the where they put the budget in, because again, the art style is fine, but I can tell the animations tends to be a bit choppy. It reminds me more, again, yet another cartoon that I was watching when I was a kid because of my sister, a cartoon based on the life of Princess Sisi of Austria.
Mm-hmm.
There's something similar going on with the specifically the animation.
So
Oh wait,
yes, this is Phyllis
gone,
Wheatley.
gone.
Basically, almost every important figure in the show is someone from history. I think the only original ones are mainly the main four: the three kids and the black man whose name is Moses. He is voiced by D. Kevin Williams.
Well, I think who was voicing a lot of characters in animated cartoons at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think I know now what the art style is reminding me of. Because, okay, while not on PBS, there was another cartoon that was co-produced by Dick Entertainment that I did watch as a teenager around this time, which acted as a sequel to the movie Evolution, which I will show that eventually to you, the movie. But that's kind of what the art style reminds me a bit. So maybe it is the same specific company. Oh, okay. That's what I was wondering
Yeah.
about before episode 3. Like, considering, well, yeah, this was before the Civil War, how we were going to touch that.
Yeah. It's another thing that the show goes into. The kind of tragic hypocrisy of a nation fighting for freedom while also supporting slavery.
Oversimplified mentioned in his recap, but supposedly people of color were fighting for the British had a better chance, even though that really did not amount much by the end of the war. So, but I don't know actually how much of that is true.
If I recall correctly, a lot of it amounted to the British offering blacks who fought for them their freedom, essentially.
Sorry. It's just the way the horse was animated in the background that was weird.
Yeah.
Oh wow, we're actually talking about that.
Yep. No sugarcoating it.
Again, sure. I guess it's a tell don't show, because that's not a pleasant sight for anyone involved.
Yes. Sometimes if a slave did have enough money, they could indeed buy their freedom. That still came with many risks, since a lot of times you could be mistaken for being an owned slave, and thus it was back off for you.
Much like any law, there are people who can easily find ways around that. Hilarious.
Ha ha ha. It's funny you mention oversimplified. regarding my note about how it's sometimes easier to teach kids with entertainment, I hear that there's actually a fair amount of teachers who actually use oversimplified videos for their classes.
Despite the humor component, it is still a good recap, with, if you want the details, open your history book, but it's a good way to teach, to actually, have kids learn the basics at the very least.
Ironically, Oversimplified has gotten to the point where the name Oversimplified is becoming ironic given how in-depth he goes with some of his videos. But hey...
It's all artifact title, I think.
And, brand recognition. Gotta work with it.
I would say give it a few centuries, but that's not even true. That is a point. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Like, overall things have improved, but yeah, there's still issues.
Gasp. Yeah, I guess this is the point where Franklin was trying to talk things with the Parliament in the British Island. Oh,
this guy's accent's also a bit up and down.
I mean, keep going like this, buddy, and the next thing that will have the word pound in it will be your wife with Benjamin Franklin tonight. So... Okay. Yeah, I still love how the British are still portrayed, despite everything, as unapologetically bastards like this. Yeah, I also noticed that the show tries to cut a couple of corners by recycling a bunch of animation, which is understandable.
Also, this music's kind of for kidsy, if you know what I mean.
You mean the theme?
The synth quality, how it's kind of plastered all over the episode.
Anyway, I guess that's it for the part 1, so episode 1 specifically.
Yes. And since this is a compilation video, we can go right ahead to episode 2 for the second part of this two-parter.
Alright then.
So, for those of you watching with us, go ahead to 0 on episode 2, Intolerable Acts.
Pilot part 2.
3, 2, 1, click. I should also note that it's kind of a bit of a refreshing for me to actually see this in order, since, like a lot of kids' series back in the times, these episodes could sometimes show up whenever.
Okay, more than anything, I would like to question why would they show this particular series out of order, considering it's a reenacting of a historical event that happened in a specific sequence.
Yeah, God forbid, but when I was younger, some TV shows I was watching sometimes got up to a certain point, and they just restart all over from the beginning all over again.
Okay.
They even got to the end.
I should elaborate. It was more so like the episodes did come out in proper order, but obviously, across the week, they would kind of just show up, here and whenever. Like, okay, basically, each episode would release in its own proper sequential order. Although, looking at the original release dates, apparently when I watched it was probably after all the episodes had released, because to its credit, most of these episodes released day after day after day in sequential order, so kudos to them on that. What I'm referring to is the old pet peeve of, when you tuned in on PBS Kids, whatever episode was on was what was on. And after they had aired them in order, I think it was about a scrambling them in order, except for when they had like two-parters or stuff like the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
It is one
And
thing that I do
also,
appreciate about streaming nowadays is being able to choose which episode you want to watch whenever.
not to mention with the catalog, well, it's not always like this. I don't know if it has been fixed, but the My Country's branch of Netflix, for example, has a lot of Goosebumps episodes of the original series completely out of order for some reason. And in most cases, they have the thumbnail of the episode spoiling the twist of the episode, which is criminal.
Ew.
But I was also wondering about on a meta aspect. This was a show running from 2002 to 2003. So George W. Bush Jr. administration and right during the period of terror. I do wonder if this was, trying to boost up the morale.
I just looked up the guy who wrote these first few episodes, a guy named Doug McIntyre.
I think I heard him.
His previous credits include episodes of Married with Children, the new WKRP in Cincinnati, Full House, and Mike Hammer.
Fair enough.
Not bad. It actually makes sense that they have a French kid, given the French's eventual involvement with the Revolutionary War as well.
Well, again, it sadly, unfortunately, all regions of America that went outside the properly far west were basically, torn apart between the British, the French, the Spanish, and the Portuguese, with some minor influence from Germans and Dutch, but not that much. The Dutch were more interested in actually going to Japan at the time.
Well, so then, how are we keeping our mainland safe then if there's no soldiers moving?
So basically,
that was actually part of the strategy. Make sure that the British forces could not actually be effective because they will need to still have a contingency, which is the downside when you have an empire this vast at the time.
Oh, one of the composers, Eric Allaman, he's done a lot of TV, but the credit I recognize the most out of all of this is the Super Mario Brothers Super Show.
Well, again, Dick Regular, I guess.
He also did one of the brief scores for the silent movie, The Battleship Potemkin.
Huh. Also, why is this guy glowing? I can literally see the beams of light from his face.
Somebody really decided to show how good their light textures
Is he a vampire
were.
in the Twilight universe or something?
Oh, God.
What would I give for having Michael Sheen being, the prosecutor instead in this?
Michael Sheen, the man who had the talent to retain his dignity despite being such a heavy presence in the Twilight movies. Probably helped that he really did not give a hell.
Oh, I have plenty to say, but you were talking.
Next you're gonna call him a cad. I don't know what to say, buddy, but judging from portraits and everything, frankly, it did not have much of a neck. So
Boston, Massachusetts Bay Colony, in case you got it confused with Boston, France, or something.
To be fair, Graves, considering how a lot of cities, colony cities in American territories are basically new existing city there,
Well, there is a Boston here in the UK.
The only reason why New Orleans is pronounced like that was because eventually the territory was purchased or basically, given away by the French. But otherwise, it should have been original name. Its original name was basically New Orleans because it was French made.
We can hear you, you know.
Hilarious. It's a good thing these soldiers do not immediately start harassing this child for having said something like that.
They're probably
Lovely day for it. Oh, there you go. They're still relatively polite, I guess. Yeah.
One thing you must learn is not to be sexist.
But it's the 1700s.
I'd like to think we started to move on from that horrible mindset. Now get to the kitchen.
Hey, that's the title of the episode. Can we go home now?
We are home. Are you serious? Looks big enough to feed 2 people.
Oh, lovely.
Yep. Your parents died? Well, too bad. Depth's onto you now, kid.
I'm
After
7.
you scrabbled the floors on the ship, then we can talk about mercy.
Yes, you're 7. In the 1700s. You're expected to work when you're 6.
My god, this might genuinely be the Ace Attorney universe.
I joke a bit, but one controversial thing that was going on in England still around the time was, children working in factories with terrible conditions.
And the mines, don't forget the mines.
Oh god, the mines.
Gotta get the sweet coal.
In fact, the movie Sweeney Todd even shows that to help placate the kids, they were given alcoholic beverages.
It's one of the opening jokes for Thank Goodness You're Here.
You'll have to be specific with Dr. Franklin.
Oh, let me guess. The mouse over his head taught him to do that.
But yeah, it's more so he didn't like having to learn English since, yes, you can imagine the French and English were not on the best terms.
We have to title every location we go to. Is this Christian Miller or Doctor Who?
Okay, to their credit, it is an educational series, so it probably helps for keeping track on that stuff.
Yeah, other eras did that too, but that's one of the That's one of the recurring things that happened most often in the Chibnall era of the show. It was kind of funny, actually.
Interesting. Is that where Infinity War got it from?
His era of the show and Infinity War came out the same year, oddly enough.
Whoops. Oh no.
Oh no!
Your mom.
Oh no.
Remember.
Oh no!
Remember,
Sorry.
no children. Like it's like framed like we're gonna hunt them. Actually.
Oh yeah. Oh no, that's a line hardly anyone can say without me bursting into laughter.
I will also say that okay, I think I get why they're doing it, but the show deliberately having the backstory of all the main characters be told in flashbacks, especially this early on, doesn't make a lot of sense when you could just start with that.
I'm guessing the idea is to show, hey, they're together, here's how they got together, essentially, since...
Like, if it was a case where they just, stuck around that much and then, say, halfway through the series, like episode 20 or something, they finally decide to reveal how they got there, as a reward for the viewer, I get that. But right at the beginning, it just feels, unnecessarily for the pace.
I think the reasoning for that is, like, the original characters are mostly meant as a vehicle for us to witness the historical stuff, which the show wants to keep most of its focus on.
Okay, knowing about these kind of historical, cartoon, that ring is going to be the key of all of this. Uh,
Yeah, I think good. Don't do the traitor drinking game.
You'll probably be dead by this point.
Members of the court, if I may, those were not actually my writings, but the writings of my mouse friend.
That's your answer to everything, Ben.
But it's true, I tell you!
There you go. He must be punished for insanity then.
Yeah, it's kind of what happens in the original Doctor Dolittle movie. Is he having like a smoke bomb when he's gonna exit stage right or something?
Benjamin Franklin.
I would like to remind you that in Assassin's Creed 3, he kind of acts as the inventor figure.
Of course.
I get he wanted like some big celebrity involvement for publicity for your show, but I don't think hiring this particular newsreader was the best way to go. He reads his dialogue like he's reading the news.
Well, when you get down to it, Benjamin Franklin was the equivalent of a news reporter at the time when you think about it.
I'm pretty sure Benjamin Franklin talk like that all the time.
Although he's probably doing that for grandstanding to the court.
Well,
He did that even when he was in private talking to somebody.
do a barrel roll, literally.
Hello and welcome to our playthrough of Donkey Kong. Which these soldiers aren't very good at.
Yeah.
Well cried.
Shite.
Too late.
Printing
And why-
your mom? I don't know.
And why were they talking so loud the other side of Boston could hear them?
Printing these nuts. Oh.
A poem so majestic it brings out the choir. But we're kids in the 1700s. Well, crud.
We don't have all day.
That's not answering the question.
You haven't answered my question.
I'm kind of getting a bit of a flashback to the Star Wars Holiday Special, in how the stormtroopers were trying to search Chewbacca's house, and it was clumsy as shit.
And then that weird bit where one of the guys
More
was like, "Hey, come to the
communication
kitchen and help me."
Yeah, I remember there was that one guy who was such a goon, he went so far as to smash the toy of the kid.
I mean, if I was forced to watch a documentary about building that weird computer thing, I want to smash it up as well.
But yeah, it looks like they're clean for now. So I guess
I'm not American.
I guess we're telegraphed love interest.
I honestly don't remember them ever becoming lovers, but to be fair, it's been ages since I saw this show, so don't quote me on that.
His mouse friend bailed him out of prison.
I guess his argument that technically his American work, but it did lose him his position as postmaster back home.
Oh no. Anyway.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
I guess it's similar to the dependent vet sunk in the first episode.
Mm-hmm. The ring.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, yeah, I guess they really are telegraphed as love interests.
All right.
Okay.
So we have our first two-parter done.
Yeah, I guess I will judge for the time being just the pilot, just a few quick words. Again, it's perfectly fine. If I got this show as a kid and was on television, I'm not entirely sure if I would have watched it, but I wouldn't have, completely changed the channel immediately because I saw a lot of show with, something similar going on at the time. So far it's holding up, even if it doesn't seem to be particularly, elevating that much. So there is that.
Similar case for me. I do appreciate how, again, it doesn't sugarcoat. It pretty much shows that they've done their research. I'm not entirely sure if, everything is 100% accurate still to this day, but it definitely seems to be one that gets it across a lot better than some others that try to whitewash certain aspects get it. And yeah, the animation definitely has aged. For the time this came out, this looked just fine. Obviously, it's aged nowadays, but I will give it credit. So far, it's something that I could see myself at least wanting to look back at. A lot of stuff I would kind of just chuck because it really has aged badly, but this one I'd say holds up still well overall. What do you think, Bibbs?
Solid enough aside from the ropey accents.
Yes. All right then. Well, one more episode left to go, folks. This one will be an episode that stands on its own. The third episode, United We Stand.
Alright then.
Alright, you
Let's
know
do
the
it.
drill.
I'm ready.
Start at 0.
Is that Avengers TV show?
Definitely.
Of course. 3, 2, 1, click. Also, in terms of theme songs, yeah, this one's still a bop to me. It's cheesy, but it's that special 2000s cheese that's at least earnest in its own way. I like how even the intro was like, oh yeah, no, this ain't your granddaddy's kitty shows. We got buildings burning, slavery, death, yep. It's a rap just as the founding fathers would have wanted it.
Hmm. Also, I'm looking at some of the trivias, and apparently, despite everything, the show might be incomplete because it got dropped by most PBS member stations a year after its premiere. I don't know if it was allowed to actually have a proper conclusion or not. But
from what I can recall, with episode 40, it did get a proper conclusion. I think it may have been more so it was going to hint at covering another war at the end, but again, it's been ages, so we'll probably have to find out if we ever do a full commentary run of this.
if only.
I mean, a show like this could look with keeping politics out of it.
So now we're in 1774. The show started in 1773.
So there are, I guess, frequent time skips.
Billy
Right.
Crystal,
And
All
Michael
Down
Doug,
with Michael Douglas.
Chicken.
I guess Arnie doesn't appear till like later.
If I understand, if I had to guess correctly, his role would be the one of the German who actually instructed the Washington soldiers to be better. So it would be later, Lives. Yes.
It's interesting seeing some of these names that were big, but still not yet as big as they would become later.
Well, also a case of just getting a quick buck. It's similar to why Samuel L. Jackson guest starred in a couple of live action shows at the time, like the Canadian one called Ghost Writer.
Oh, he was in that. Wow.
He was Jamal's uncle, I think.
Ah, some of the old politics of the day. Yeah, as you can imagine, while revolution was on the colonies' mind, not all members of the colonies were on board with it.
This is why it kind of took long. If I recall correctly, it's also the case where the 4th of July was more of an accident of a date and was supposed to be a bit earlier than that.
Yep.
It kind of figures, like out of all of the possibilities of making an author insert into, making a fan fiction about, meeting historical characters, it kind of has to be this one. Then again, so did the Kool-Aid Man with its comic line.
Wait, what?
Oh, you haven't seen it? Linkara covered that. A couple of issues of the Kool-Aid Man comic has him traveling through time and helping the American Revolution War.
I must have missed that episode. Holy cow.
I'll give you a link later.
So yeah.
Wow. Leave it to a show of the early 2000 to drop a truth nuke that people forget to actually listen to this very day.
Yep, like, this show did not mess around, honestly.
Oh shit. All right, that was actually an habit that was done by both sides for the sake of, spite towards the opposition. Time favors.
And yeah, that's another thing. Our protagonists aren't exactly perfect themselves, since James himself
They are
is...
children.
Yeah. And admittedly, politics from their end aren't too good. Like, James is a full hot-blooded American, and Henry is French. So, yeah, he ain't gonna care for what happens to the English.
They still have their own character flaw, like in the second part of the pilot. It showcases that I keep forgetting. Let me check again his name. The blonde kid,
James.
the James. Thank you. Is they still have blatant, systematic sexism that instead Sarah has to knock some sense into.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, fuck that. I gotta do my chicken story. How's he even doing?
In the wise words of George Wood, isn't that a hoot?
As well, I know some other words of George Wood. You are stupid.
Yuck, yuck, yuck.
That is one annoying flaw. So much for realism.
I guess James, is hit full force with the Schadenfreude.
Okay, this is one thing that always whenever I watch an American-made show here in the UK, since we have fewer advert breaks in our shows, it was kind of weird when something just faded out as if going to an advert, but then faded back in a second later.
It gets even better ways because my country did not even have at all ad break shows unless it was actually the end of an episode and the beginning of a different one.
Really?
So we're just kind of used to the fade to black. Yes.
This was on PBS. I thought PBS didn't have adverts.
I don't know
They
whose
did,
idea
yes.
was it when it came to establish properly a television system for my country, but whoever they were, they had the conscious decision of establishing that people will have to basically get good and survive like 20 minutes of a cartoon episode. Nowadays, for a lot of live action stuff, like crime procedural episode like CSI, for example, there are ad breaks. But still not for cartoons, nor anime for that, either Japanese, American, or from different countries. Those actually tend to always get to have the full episode, broadcasted without stop.
Mm-hmm.
Although that didn't stop for some weird things to. What are these transitions? For some weird stuff to happen. I always remember that if there was a case where someone accidentally put up, a cartoon episode a bit later than the normal program, and there was something like a newscast having to happen at a specific time, like say 2 p.m., the episode would just actually stop, no commercial, and then the newscast will start. That's it was one case where one situation of the Treehouse of Horror Simpsons was having the Homer Cubed episode, and it just stopped before it was over, and that kind of unsettled me and my sister because we weren't processing what was happening.
So, yes,
Anyway.
Sam and John Adams.
Also, it's also to appreciate that, yes, we did have the Benjamin Franklin in the previous episodes, but we're not starting immediately with all the big hitters like Washington. So,
one trend I do like in a lot of Revolutionary War stories is that they treat Washington often like the big reveal, essentially.
I mean, okay, if I understand correctly, the historical component, while he managed to make a name for himself, he was not really the first choice for anything, and just
No.
happened to be put in command, eventually.
Yeah, like many things in history, he was definitely not the plan from the get-go.
Yeah, I was asking earlier about whereabouts this was recorded. The series' voice cast was mainly based in Omaha, Nebraska, but it also recorded Kathleen Barr's lines from Vancouver, and any celebrities he had on the show were based in Los Angeles.
Huh,
So
so
there's a
both
tinge of Canada in this.
so most of the actors were actually American. It's funny because a lot of times shows like these would usually have most of their cast be Canadian, but in this case, Kathleen Barr was the exception.
I wonder if they all recorded their lines over the. I'm not sure if they could do it over the internet at that point, because nowadays, like I saw a documentary on the voice recording for the recent DuckTales, and the cast and everyone recorded their lines at the same time, which meant that while it was afternoon in the US, David Tennant was still in the UK, and he had to record his lines live with the cast at midnight.
I can't with these transitions. Combine that with what I mentioned at the beginning, Jovah, I do wonder if this show was partially or potentially financed from the government for the sake of proper education. I mean, it was broadcasted on PBS, so that would explain also why trying to keep most the American cast.
Well, yes, PBS were carried by a U.S. public television network, so
Not to
it
mention,
is
again, it was mostly
possible.
an educational channel, with stuff like Bill Nye, science show.
It would also explain why, a deep cartoon like this got the budget it got all the aspects it has. While some of the dialogue is a bit exposition-y, I do like how, for the most part, they do keep the educational bits relatively natural to the plot for the most part.
There's still a lot of telling and not showing, possibly for budget reasons. But again, I kind of understand because this show clearly screams to me that it still did not have a lot of money despite everything poured into it, or at the very least, it was given mostly to the voice cast.
So when's something going to happen to him?
So,
I've seen these shows a lot. I promise I won't let anything happen to you so that happens.
So one of the special aspects of this show is that it would treat a lot of its historical figures as kind of mystery guests who you would kind of have to try and guess who they were before the episode would reveal whom.
That was the previous episode, James. Oh, if only. James is gonna become the twist is gonna be that James is gonna be secretly moving back to Europe, during his old age. He will turn out to be the grandfather of Lenin.
Jesus. Yeah, okay, the
Okay.
weird dirt mud
Yeah, the transition is like someone is throwing. It's the pocket sand gag from King of the Hill.
I know, right?
Um,
What's going on?
Basically, the guy who got tarred and feathered
Body
is
horror.
in medical trouble, to say the least.
I was going to say he was dead for a second.
Oh, so it's like that sequence in House of Wax 2005.
Oh, so he peeled the tar off himself, and
Yeah.
yeah. I doubt they're going to show that on screen, but
Like,
It's still the fact that they're not sugarcoating in talking about what's actually going on, which for a kids show, yeah, that's actually a statement to make. Which, to be fair, again, if you have experience, we were talking about oversimplified in the previous episode. If you remember, Is Read About Revolutionary Wars does talk about the tarring and feather, but it's mostly played for laughs. It doesn't really talk about, well, how much of a torture it was. Okay, but they're still, not making it completely cruel, but still.
it's like the bits where the skin got peeled off are thankfully covered by the bandages, basically.
Like, I thought it was a complete thing, considering, the entire body was tarred.
I think the idea is that he kind of went into shock after peeling off some of his own skin, so thankfully they were able to remove the rest more properly.
There was one giant container. Oh, sorry, I need to be super British. What's all this then?
Oi, 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 you need a license for that now.
License for parting. General Nicolas Cage.
I said Gage.
I guess that's good enough. Every time it happens, I keep thinking about that passing mentioning from George Carlin, where swearing on something just doesn't mean shit because it just works. So as a kid, he always said, I swear on my mother's tits. Lava cannon? What? That face. And that's how the revolution was won.
The
which
battle of how
is,
my French accent can get even sillier.
And yes, it turns out the woman they met was the famous Abigail Adams.
You can just
Billy
hear
Crystal?
you can just faintly hear the eagle screaming in the background. Also, I think yes, there is.
I love this dramatic music every time it fades into this bit.
Yeah, it looks almost like a Stickers album.
Mm-hmm.
I love that the few bits that I watched showcase that apparently there was a PC game thing based around this, but I know nothing about it.
Could have been one of those educational CD-ROM games.
Alright, I guess that's it then.
All right, I'll go first and say that yes, I had a nice trip down memory lane with this. I might even watch the show more so overall. But yeah, I feel like it balances entertainment enough with education. Yeah, some things you definitely have to make a bit more simple for the kids to get, but the show is also very blunt with some of the more horrific elements of the tensions escalating that would eventually culminate with the war itself. So again, good on them for that.
Waves?
Yeah, it's still a solid enough show. Although I'll have to watch all the other episodes to have a full opinion.
Possibly for the future.
As for me, it's not that much different from what I said before. Again, it's solid. Not sure if I would have, continued watching this as a kid's teenager, but it's harmless at the end of the day. The more dated aspect, I argue, it's the usage of how we're referring to the natives. Again, part of me wonders if it was intentional for being, period accurate about it, but I don't know. I think it was more of a case just, where the early 2000s was still, a period where they thought it was more liberal to actually define them as such. But again, product of its time and all. But yeah, if we ever get back to watch the rest of the show, I'll be fine with it. Nothing too much, of a harm on this.
All right then. Well, that was the 3 episodes of Liberty's Kids. We hope you enjoyed it like we did. Tune in next July 4th for whatever comes next. Maybe it'll be more episodes of this, or maybe it'll be something completely different. The future can only tell so much.
Yeah.
All right, see ya.
Yeah.